Uh, Sorry, there's recording in progress. Yeah, I'm very happy to be chairing this session today, uh, uh, es- especially because uh, I'm chairing Professor Anita Ghai's session. Uh, well, as they say, Professor Ghai does not need an introduction, but still as a chair, I thought I'll share some personal notes. I say personal, and I really mean it because they contributed to my intellectual evolution as a student of disability studies and humanities in general. Uh, to begin with, Professor Guy, uh, you know,
Anita is okay, Hem.
thank you, Anita. Uh, Anita always, uh, first and foremost, she stands for access and accessibility. I remember, this is a personal note, Anita. 2011, I organized some kind of a workshop on disability studies. Anita comes and says, your slope is too slopey. What she meant was our ramp was, ramps were, no, we couldn't call them ramp. It was just a slope of some kind. And she was immediately, pointing about access issue and what is access. She gave notes on that and then went on to her keynote. So, I remember that, and I remember that even now very warmly. And after that, in CSDS, everybody went on into modifying, have the notion of access architecturally, uh, culturally, and epistemologically. That takes a lot of evolution. And Anita's intellectual, evolution and contribution organically is an evidence of it. Second, she is immersed in the everydayness of knowledge. As I always read through her books and lectures and so on. Everydayness in a narrow sense of the term and also broader sense of the term. Narrow sense, what I think is about how I'm speaking to you on this mobile phone. What is it? Did I eat well? Am I hungry? Uh, what is my gender role in it? And what kind of knowledge that I have come to peruse because of my privileges and non-privileges. That kind of everyday. In a broader sense of the term, seeing the bigger picture. Generally, this is the problem in humanities, where when seeing the wood, when analyzing the tree, they're okay. But when they are seeing the woods, that is a broader jungle, bigger picture, they lose track. But as I see Anita's work, it ties both narrow picture and the larger picture in terms of everydayness, in its engenderedness, in its, in its cultural sense, and most importantly, its material sense. And third, her longest legacy is one foot in women's studies and another in disability studies. Um, well, I think it comes with making enemies on both the fronts. It also comes with risks of happiness is about making friends on both the things. And the third, by and large, I think it comes with uh, connecting the dots, sometimes painfully, sometimes happily. I think uh, that is what we are going to hear about her resistances. But her most important achievement in the history of disability studies, as I see it narrowly, is the way she has founded disability studies in the university setting, intersectionally. Her PhD program is picking up now. Well, she's a global voice of DS women's studies and beyond. As I said, for me personally, it's in this way, I'm just tracing my own footing in DS, connecting to her journey, prescribing her essays to my students. So I thought it's a rare privilege to share, and I thought uh, there cannot be a better contribution to this workshop except sharing my personal notes about Anita. Thank you. Let us begin.
Thank you, Hem. I mean, that's really, yeah, it's almost going back somewhere. And thank you so much. And today, on 3rd of December, I mean, this is really, really a privilege to be in a session that is being chaired by him. And I, of course, somewhere, when we talk about, when I asked Sandeep and Someshwar about the valedictory part, I kind of said that, look, I've not been there for the papers, so I'm not sure what justice I'm going to, do to the papers. And then I was told that, okay, fine, whatever you want to kind of, say, and whatever I think I can is to be shared today. I hope it will be okay for, the audience. And of course, good part is that we can sit and discuss it. I was sent the concept paper, and I was really quite, what do they say? I mean, one part of me loved it because, for a person like me, I think resistance has, as a word, as a concept, as a conceptualization, I think it is always there in my, I think, growing up. And especially when Hem says that when I did my, like, 1 foot in the women's studies and 1 foot in the disability advocacy, I think definitely, resistance, I think somewhere was very, very clearly, part and parcel of my own life. I mean, I think it's there. I mean, I'm just thinking of a very, very, I mean, the first person I could say who I met in the West. I mean, like, I'd gone for the SDS conference. And in this particular conference, I happened to be like, like that, like this, sometimes you're lucky because I happened to kind of meet Mike Oliver, Colin Barnes, and all the guys, Vic and Marian Corker, and more important than that, I mean, Marian, of course, was a friend, and another friend that I made was Susan Gable. And both Susan Gable and Susan Peters, both actually in the academic interactions, as it so happened, I think they to begin with used the concept of struggle within the disability advocacy, and in their theory of resistance, which I thought was very, very important. And I read it with, really, it was very important. I think I must have read it almost five times when I kind of, did that. And of course, I've shared, some thoughts in my book also, and because something which they were really kind of trying to say that the two are related. Struggle, in one sense, uses forms of resistance, and resistance can be understood as a kind of struggle. So I mean, that was something which I really kind of remember, and it is always there with me. So I think the use of resistance theory, I mean, actually makes it possible, and the assumptions that are there about the circulation of power through the social relations. That, I mean, I was listening to Ritvik and some parts about social model, but I could not really you know like he said that he was working from two computers, so the voice was not very clear in that sense. But I do remember that in almost 1998, Gable had put forward what she called it as the aesthetic theory of disability. And in one sense, this particular theory, according to her, the development of one's embodied self through the process of experiencing life is significantly influenced by personal interpretations which are unique to each disabled person. And I still maintain that the disabled body interacts within a social environment, but identity itself starts with the body. I mean, what the body does, how the body looks, what the body says, how the body feels, and how the others experience the body. And I think that is where, I mean, somewhere resistance became like very, very important in my own understanding. And in evolving, whatever a theoretical approach that I kind of have thought of, it's almost like when I say that I'm disabled, I say something about the politics, about the culture within which I experience life, its values, and its norms, whatever is there. And I also consider disabledness in light of my other body experiences, which is, gender, caste, my love affairs with the doctors, in terms of, metallic valve, in terms of breast cancer, and how these are constructed and valued in the given culture. So I feel that if the statement appears to disagree with the prevailing notions of the given culture, then I think the claim is one of resistance to those notions, and the claim collaborates with my culture to construct my disabled body. I think the statement in itself says not only something about me, how I view my body and myself, but it also says much about the others with whom I experience my world. So when I'm talking about this resistance, I mean, I'm going to go into something which is I'm not sure whether people would like it or not. I mean, at least I'm really impressed by another guy who died very soon, but once again a friend, and was like, and from whom I learned a lot, by way of, resistance. I mean, and two major concepts that came up, which Tobin Cybers, just to, kind of name him. And I think it's a wonderful book, and I would, recommends that, people must learn, go over the book, and it's important to understand what Tobin actually said. And these two terms that came were passing and masquerade, you know. So when you talk about, resistance, when you talk about power, you talk about how, on the International Disability Day, where, I was waiting in my listserv that whether, someone will say something. And then I found that one of the assistant registrar, Dr. Prasad, of course, brought in, uh, at least sent in a video about the International Disability Day. But if you look at how the response comes up, I think it's sometimes it hurts you also, and sometimes you also start asking that can I resist, not being there at all, if they are not going to think about disability at all. I mean, in one particular sense. And I, the part which was the passing, I'm not going to go into detail because, most of us know that we have all the time, and especially the ones in our generation, I think, the older generation, I would say, that, and I'm not sure whether the younger generation does that or not. That's something for me to kind of, find out. But there is this understanding, no, where we could kind of overcome the disability, no. And I remember going to college and wearing, salwars that could have, like, very, very bigger bottoms, and, so that, the calipers were hidden. And I would kind of, pretend as a quote unquote normal, or pass as I mean, that was also a kind of resistance, right? I mean, like, that I needed to kind of, indicate to them that I can pass as a, because it was in a able-bodied society. And, by that time, at that time, the only person I remember at that time was Alfred Adler, or maybe Freud, I mean, to some extent, but Adler, who, I mean, spoke about the social interest and compensation, and also about, little bit about the resistance part, So in one sense, I mean, it was as if, you were resisting the fact that I do not want to be marked as a disabled person, and I would resist that power that was there, which actually, I mean, later in retrospective, when I think about it, I mean, I would kind of realize that even though, I mean, I can, dress up in a particular way, but the gait, I mean, because my, right leg is about quarter-inch shorter than the left. So obviously it was very, very clear that I couldn't walk straight, and yet, I would try to, I mean, do my best. I remember going on long flights where I wouldn't take off the calipers and sit there. And even if it was an 8 or 9 hours flight, it was like tiring, but somewhere, I mean, this is where, I mean, I'm saying at that time, this appeared as resistance, though later, of course, I found that it was the vulnerability rather than the resistance, in one sense. Both as a psychologist, with the psychoanalytical leanings, I mean, I've had great interest. With great interest, I've read Tobin's work, on Professor Tobin Cyber's work on both passing and masquerade. And the latter concept in both is both literal and metaphorical, and has considered crucial concept in many, many disciplines. And the concept of masquerade was formulated by Joan Riveria and used in concurrence with psychoanalysis to examine gender issues. She wrote the following in her 1929 essay on womanliness as masquerade, describes a defensive posture in which women may adopt a mask of excessive femininity as a defense when entering professional spaces defined by male power and privilege. Caught in a trap in which masquerading womanliness is also defined as the essence of femininity, of what it is to be women, she manages only to signify that she is not a woman. Thus, masquerade enables social conventions to be broken, crossing behavioral boundaries, and masquerade, in fact, denotes pretending or putting on a mask, which is important to Freud's perspective with regards to gender, and as it is fundamentally essentialist. According to this concept, a woman who violates the social code of her time by participating in an intellectual profession will project an outward appearance of extreme femininity in appearance and behavior in order to avoid, the reprimand for her masculine. And as Cybers had used this particular masquerade as understanding the political ends. And according to him, though disabled people pass by concealing their disabled from discovery, they also engage in practices which can display their disability by exaggerating it. Cypers also refers to these change forms of, disability passing as the masquerade. And to me, it seems that masquerade produces resistance to the normative roles and norms. Disabled people feel empowered as desiring subjects capable of their own, recreation and in control not only of their bodies, but also of their lives. And Tobin Sivers, of course, used 6 narratives, of which I'm going to use some, both in terms of India, and not really taking Tobin's work, but following him, in that sense, of both the theoretical and political implications of disability. He uses the first 4 narratives as beneficial, and according to him, the first narrative indicates that the masquerade may inflect private and public spaces, allowing expression of public view of disability for political ends. Within India, I think that the innumerable disability dharnas, the strikeouts, the rallies, the hunger strike, the peace marches, the candle marches, the court arrests, which I, of course, have, I've been through, have been the weapons, to court arrest, attack, accuse, and expand the horizon of disability. It was through these efforts that the public and the media have initiated discussions on, I think, how we call it as the resistance, power, and transgression, I think, which are very, very important. Few years back, I went to pick up my laptop. It was a Dell laptop, which means that it's quite some time. Since it was not accessible, I had to send my escort to get the laptop, my driver. The receptionist refused to allow my escort to speak to my, to the person concerned. She also did not permit the escort to enable me to discuss my queries with the engineer on the phone. Despite my repeated requests, the reception did not entertain me. After that, in front of the public, in public space, it's not the first time, this was the first time I did it, but I did it later also again. I crawled and I created really havoc that will always register my protest. It was not easy for me to crawl as I was showing my pathetic, vulnerable, an infantilized part. In a way, it creates a self which the public would not want to ever like me. However, this is not one of my favorite protests, but insensitive people need to be shaken up. Ultimately, the message was that I was asking for justice and public spaces should be accessible. And I think the fact that I could do that, there was an audience which was there, and many of them went up and they said that we are going to call police if you are not actually going to respond to, me. I mean, they didn't even know my name, but if they're not going to respond to me. So I think that was one something which I kind of, and this I would want to kind of say that was a part of, resisting, and yet, also experiencing the vulnerability, which was there. So when power is there, you're always, troubled, whether you want a strategy that would actually be a, good strategy which you will be able to work on, or whether you will be able to kind of, defend yourself or not, in that sense. The second narrative is an exchange of ideas, both between disabled and, able-bodied people, so that a sense of disability can be engaged with. So a fellow visually impaired colleague, I mean, I often remember this, says that people tend to speak louder, as if assuming that a blind person is also assumed to be deaf. Notwithstanding the irritation at showing annoyance at performing routine deeds and excellence in certain activities such as swimming, sports, music, and the idea to engage with the understanding of disability, there can be a struggle over the labels in the issue of passing and use of intentional revelation, which is achieved through the use of symbols that defend stigma, such as eye-catching hearing aids, signing in public, or use of cane, and of course, the quintessential wheelchair and the crutches. I think stigma symbols thus carry the currency, and they're very much part of the resistance, as though, as through them, disability becomes clearly visible. Such a statement thus is made to be able-bodied society can be utilized to connect with the disability issues. The other narrative says that the masquerade is an existing system of oppression. I recall being a member of a project on education. The tendency of the group was to valorize the fact that sitting on the ground makes us connected with the grassroots. My disability became a part of the communication to the able-bodied society that marginality could have different colors. For me, in developing world, where architectural barriers are more a norm than exception, neither physical nor social navigation is an easy endeavor. In a scenario where the non-availability of assistive devices such as power wheelchairs or visual or hearing aids, it's only recently that many of us have become mobile. My experience with the motorized wheelchair, in one sense, is intriguing. And when I first started going to the market or to meet family, I was really greeted with the stares as well as the questions. It's almost like, I mean, I feel that they suddenly hold your, wheelchair, and I have to turn back and say that you are touching my body. Don't do it, and yet this kind of resistance, because and I felt my privacy was being invaded, and there were a number of people who would ask personal questions about the wheelchair and my condition, and I do, on the other hand, experience a sense of freedom as I can manage on my own. However, this excitement is often short-lived, as you know, I suppose, the cloak of competence is contingent on the accessibility of the built environment. So when I would drive, I would always, I mean, I was driving and it was like, almost getting that sense that, oh, going on to 70, 75, 80. Sorry, yeah. I used to do this earlier because it was possible in Dholakwa Road at that time. So, and then I would reach somewhere where somebody had to take my wheelchair off, and I was there sitting. And suddenly I would kind of, imagine that whatever the resistance is there and whatever the, vulnerability is there, both of them are together. And I couldn't quite decide that whether, I should be feel happy, or I should feel like, that I should just stick to, I mean, like, maybe not going to places where, I could get the sometimes unsolicited advice, as well as, or when it was, painful. It also was, I mean, when because I had one foot on the women's studies, I was elected as a president of IDWS in 2008. So when I was elected, I was sitting there in while we were deliberating, and I was just thinking that, is it because, I mean, was I, was I a token, where I have just been, elected. I mean, I was elected, that was okay, but the president part, so I just asked myself, was it, a token for myself? And then I think the way I resist, and I, of course, how much time I have. How much time I have?
As much as you want.
No, not like that.
About half an hour more.
No, I don't want half an hour. Okay, so yeah, so where was I? Yeah, so I kind of thought about it, and I thought about the power of being on that chair. I could also think about the resistance part, and I thought that, so what? I mean, even if they have thought of me as a token, how do they know that I would remain only the token? I mean, I can go much further than that, in that particular sense. And I think I'm glad that I kind of did that, because in one particular sense, IWS is the only conference in which, when you go, it's once in 3 years, but it's always there, and it always has something where disability is discussed, and not as a symposium, not as a but it is part and parcel of the keynote lectures also, so that we could kind of somewhere indicate to people that it is as important as any other issues. Such masquerades that are useful and pinpoint an existing system of oppression are very important. And my sense is that despite the serious accessibility issues, disabled people do have experiences which are not available to the able-bodied. And the experiential terrain of disabled can go beyond the cultural mythologies, as the able-bodied has no notion of the bodily deprivations. I remember Lawrence Slade interviewed a woman in her early 20s who had begun using a wheelchair instead of calipers and crutch she had previously used, and which had given her valuable exercise. But because she hated the effect that it had on her appearance and body shape, by contrast, in the wheelchair, she felt that she could glide quietly and gracefully into a room and look less distorted. I think the fourth narrative, the masquerade, may put expectations and prejudices about disability in service of the disabled people. As Goffman, reports, I think the able-bodied expect the cripple to be crippled, to be disabled and helpless, and to be inferior to themselves, and they will become suspicious and insecure if the cripple falls short of these expectations. I think what is significant is that disabled need to contradict the normal expectations that the able society has. Another memory of me was getting the prestigious Nehru Memorial Teen Murti Fellowship. I was dismayed as the built structure of the library was completely inaccessible, and I had to forego many interactions with other colleagues as I could not get my original room in the required building as it had stairs and toilet was inaccessible. Though confused, I managed to actually complain and to expose the ableist structure. Had I not done this, I would have never got a chance, where now the library has all the facilities such as accessible ramps, toilets, as well as provision for the visually impaired for a computer usage, thus creating a disabled self who is independent. My submission is that the narratives of the masquerades are really not about impairment. I think they are more about resistance. And it is not that discrimination based on caste, gender, sexual orientation, religion don't occur regularly. It is just that the people discriminated against the united in struggle against the more collective stereotypes that are there. The fifth and the sixth narrative indicate the difficulties of this practice. According to Cybers, the narrative was as follows, where he said that many representations of people with disabilities, however, use narrative structure that masquerade disability for the benefit of the able-bodied people. I made sure that I would use my calipers when I have to fly. And also my motorized wheelchair clearly indicates that public understand disability. Thus, masquerade assists in communicating a message to the society so that the identification of disability and related issues cannot be connected. Very often it so happens that I travel alone, and when you enter, and I'm familiar, I take Indigo quite frequently now, of course, not after the COVID, but before that. And usually the first question would be, are you going alone? Now, when this question would come, are you going alone? There were many, vaguely, I think at least that I can remember right now, 2 or 3 responses, and how could I resist in that particular sense, where, one was anger, that why is it that this question was once again pervading, somewhere invading my privacy, because they don't ask everyone like that if you're going alone or not. It's only with the person with disability who's going alone, and you're asking that particular person that. So then I would realize that anger doesn't really help you always. So I would kind of thought that let me try and use humor. So I would kind of, this hostess who would be there, I would say, she would say that, are you alone? So I said, yeah, I am. And then I would kind of say that, how about coming with me? And she said, Arey, main kaise ja sakti hu? And then I would kind of smile and I would say that, no, na. So then stop asking this, that I'm going alone. Because if you cannot do anything for me, then don't ask me these kind of questions. And yet, this kind of resistance, which is, I think over the years, they kind of started, learning that every time this kind of a question doesn't, is not really useful in sense. I also remember the last thing which I'm going to kind of say was when I was not given the wheelchair from Dehradun. I mean, I was coming, as I'd gone to the IS Academy in Missouri, and from there you took the car, and we took the flight. And of course, my wheelchair was there, but the wheelchair was in the cargo. And, I asked for the wheelchair, and the wheelchair didn't come. It took a lot of time. And finally, I had to crawl on the tarmac, and they kept on saying that it'll come, but I did it because I think that in itself was also, I think, a resistance. And that also because there was someone in my university who actually thought that I was creating this drama, that because I wanted something or whatever. It wasn't that. I think I just wanted the SOPs, that should be understood well. But, just to resist, that this power that you have over me, that because I need a wheelchair, which you're not giving me, I need to kind of indicate to you that one of these days you would actually, fail in this process, and you would have to make sure that you are, it's not as if disabled people are just simply, concessional categories, and there's no playing field for them. I think that is something which should not happen. The final variety of masquerade related to the type informing human interest theories about people with disabilities, which is something which we always call, like what Butler called it as, and what Cybers now calls it as, disability drag. Now, Bollywood as well as television are excellent examples. It's extremely useful to share disabling parts with the audience, as this is the way one can encircle disability. However, it is problematic as disability appears as a pretense superimposing on the able-bodiedness. It is true that the Indian cinema is, obviously reaching to disability becoming a site of social and political debate. However, the use of the superstars such as Amitabh Bachchan and so on and so forth, and many more whose star value and the spectacular performance epitomize their perfect able-bodiedness, coupled with, this whole, negation of disability, not only keeps disability out of community view, but converts its lived reality. I think taking cues from Cybers, I would really want to say that resistance for our everyday life, and for me, the everyday life is that, when sometimes, when I write, when I call up, from to, let's say, the finance office, the response is not very, it is there. They will say that we'll bring it back. But when I when I leave the room and actually come to the finance office and then say that, look, for a particular student, I need this, the fellowship amount urgently. I think when I'm there, then I think the message becomes different. And there are times when I resist the idea that I'm going to keep sitting out here and I'm not going to go till you actually do my, whatever my student has to work has to be done, should be done. I think, when I'm not going to go into Foucault, because we know that power is everywhere, and also knowledge and knowledge construction, of course, is extremely important. But I think what is really important is that how we can, in our everyday life, how is it that we can, indicate to people, but it requires, somewhere, all the time you cannot do it. You get tired also. For example, I'll just tell you, there's a huge parking in opposite Daulat Ram, which is close to my department. I mean, my department in the sense that now I've given up on psychology, but the political science department and, psychology and maths, I think that's right. And Tanmoy's office is there. Sometimes I want to, meet him or whatever. So there are three spaces which are meant for people with disabilities. I mean, the cars, they're there. Forever. I mean, whenever I have gone, I don't go there frequently now, but whenever I go, even now, there are three cars out there, which are professors' cars, they're well educated, everyone. And yet they would park the car out there. Now, it depends again on my mood, on the level of resistance that is there, the anger that is there, the idea that I must indicate to them that this is important, or maybe because I'm an advocate, so it must be definitely be pointed out. So then I would tell the guard, I would actually take the phone numbers and I would call them up, and they would say, oh, did I park the car there? I'm so sorry. And then, of course, after 5 or 10 minutes, they would come and remove the car. And then one of them actually said, अरे तो आपको एक ही तो गाड़ी लगानी है, तो फिर आप तीनों को फोन किस लिए कर रहे हो? And then I realized, that somewhere, creating awareness, creating an understanding about disability, and also how resistance, I mean, on this everyday basis, like a parking, or like, even if you go over in DU and if you're walking, I mean, of course, they've done the, whatever should have been done. But of course, because many of us are not there while they were doing it, and there are problems which are there, and yet, I think to resist forever for all these things becomes very difficult and painful. But all the same, I think on this day, 3rd of December, 2021, I mean, I'm not sure as to what all we can and how we would do it. But academically, I think knowledge production, understanding power, understanding resistance, understanding, I think, the epistemology of, the ignorance of disability is something which is very, very important. And I hope that such, seminars and conferences, I mean, thanks to Sumeshwar and thanks to Khalsa College and everyone, I think we must always convey at least our ideas to them. And for me, I mean, one thing which I would say and which I've resisted is that it's okay to have, seminars and conferences which are meant for people with disabilities. But I think we need to also enter the mainstream seminars, the so-called mainstream seminars, and that is where the resistance, I think, should be there. That's all that I have to say. And because today is 3rd December, I cannot but actually remind all of us the slogan that nothing for us without us. I think that is something that we cannot ever forget. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anita, on behalf of, am I audible?
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you. On behalf of everyone, I thank you so much for delivering this valedictory note. 1, 2, 3 important lessons I learned now about resistance. One is that resistance does not have a standard telos, that is an end. I keep resisting until I achieve that status, or I achieve that goal, or I achieve a particular social end. No, resistance should be in all directions.
Yes.
It should be inside you, outside you, and all the masquerades one need to put up. And it is back and forth, sidewards, it goes in all directions. And it should be resistance to your own idea about yourself and the scripts and discourses that you buy into. So that's the first lesson I learn about resistance. And the second is about, no matter your affiliation, and even if some position is advantageous to you, take a stock about that advantage you have, and then resist your own temptation to that advantage. So that is, again, I see that as an epistemological problem, but as an instance of moral politics getting into epistemic thinking. And the third thing I learned from Anita's talk about resistance is, well, you cannot always resist because it comes with affects, and it is informed by affects and a spectrum of affects. Sometimes you need to consolidate and then get back. So thank you so much, Anita. I just want to open it up for public discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Hem.
Maybe someone can help reading out chat messages and boxes and so on.
I can.
Sorry, but there aren't any.
My God.
No, it's, they will all come in a rush.
Congratulations from Shilpa. Okay, so there is a, oh, lovely to hear your talk on.
Hi, Anita, can you hear me?
Can you read the messages aloud so that,
Yeah, but this is a, it says, ma'am, lovely to hear your talk on resistance. What do I do?
That's how much we enjoy your talk, Anita.
Hi, Hem. This is Sandeep. I just thought I'll ask Anita a question while others are thinking and preparing. Anita, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Sandeep.
Yes. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, whether in a formal setup or an informal setup. It's always a learning. And I think that always continues. So I just wanted to ask, I mean, you talked about the social, you talked about the larger, public sphere. I just wanted to ask you, how would you see resistance in close quarters like family and relatives? How does that happen? How masquerading you think takes place there? And how are there any tips or ideas that you want to share if people of our generation or younger generations want to negotiate that bit? Because that sometimes becomes more of a embarrassing situation than even sometimes the social, because social you're alone and you can actually learn to negotiate sometimes, but the family is too close for you to even react very, very aggressively. So how would you think about that?
It's a very, very important question, Sandeep. I'm not sure whether I have a ready-made answer to this, but I want to say that many times, what happened was that in the predominant North Indian Punjabi families, for example, my mother's brother, so when I was kind of, supposedly we were discussing something in the family, and I'm trying to say that, well, this is not the way you can do it or whatever. So he would say, ab teri baat ka bura kya manna, I mean, it was a complete negation, of,
Yeah.
that it's almost like of my humanity. I mean, like, in that sense, and yet, I mean, he wouldn't understand, that this was being, given to me as something like, as if he loves me more, So then I think one of these days, I mean, I actually got, I mean, I was really annoyed, and I said that next time I'm not going to say anything to you, and I'm not going to come also. Now it was almost like a threat kind of a thing. And when he said, but मैंने करा क्या? So then I made him, like, understand कि इसका मतलब क्या निकल रहा है, you got to kind of understand it. And then he said कि नहीं, मैं इसको आगे से कुछ नहीं कहूंगा. I mean, like kind of that. But I know that it will happen. Like, it's not like something which is there. I think family, my personal family, are I suppose little more because I think my brothers were younger, and they kind of, have never seen me without disability. I mean, always there. So they became like, there is no special whatever done for me. I mean, like, it's only the ultimate thing would be कि अगर मेरी wheelchair बिल्कुल खराब हो गई है and they have to do something, so then they will, kind of see that, okay, kuch karna hai. But otherwise, I mean, like, the idea is that, I mean, you can do everything. So don't give us this crap. I mean, like, so my whatever would be. But I think in my personal relationships with people, I mean, and especially I think in intimate relationships, I mean, I can just give you one, and there are more, I mean, maybe it's better to kind of, I mean, I can fight it outside better than when I'm there inside. But I mean, let me kind of say this, where, this, I mean, I had a friend, and, he'd broken his foot. So, but after some days, they gave him that walking, what is called? Yeah, walking foot kind of a thing. So it was his birthday. So I kind of said that now we can go. So he said that why we would be mutually, we would be embarrassed. Now, this came to me, I mean, mutually embarrassed. And I actually, I mean, I said, did can you repeat that? He said, no, don't go into this psychoanalysis, okay? So I said, no, I'm not going into psychoanalysis. I just want you to repeat what you said, So I think he said that you've heard, what I said, So I was in the car, and I was wearing the calipers and the crutches, and I got down and I said that, look, goodbye, I'm not going to see you again. Now, it pained me also, but it also meant that my, my existence and my internal, I'm not sure whether, yeah, it was like, the humiliation that one experiences, and I kind of said that I'm, and he came back and he said, ki, yes, you're a therapist and you're whatever, think about it. I said, that is why I can think about it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have thought about it also, So this is the reason that I can think about what the, what has been underwritten out there, and that's most important for me. And I walked out, But I don't know, Sandeep, whether there can be definitive answers that I can, because, many times the relationships are such that you can't, I mean, sometimes you just have to be very, very, indicate in a sometimes not at that instant, but maybe later, where you've thought about it and you kind of know fully strategically, that this is what I'm going to say, then I think maybe there are ways, but there are times when I can be, as vulnerable as anyone in that sense.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, it makes sense because a lot of times the only form of resistance one knows with family is to escape the
Yeah.
situation, and I think all of us have gone through that. I have personally gone through when my brother was getting married and he was getting rishtas, and how my father used to very surreptitiously, he thought he was doing it.
Yeah.
But now when I think it retrospectively, I knew he was doing it deliberately because he didn't want the girl's family at the very first instance to know that there is a
Yeah.
disabled boy in the family. So
Yeah.
he will call me to the bedroom with an intention of wanting to talk about something, and then very surreptitiously suggest that you sit here and I'll come back and I'll talk to you later, so that you don't know whether you should go out or whether you should stay here. And I was young then, I had no ideas, no ways of analyzing that. So that's why I was asking, because a lot of the youngsters you talk to do tell us the ways in which they feel at times excluded from family while they are with the family. So how does one think about these things? So that's why I was asking. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Also, another example, which I could kind of, because he's written about the actual lived world, how life is tough. Because I have a friend who has a Down syndrome son, and the daughter is an architect, and she had to think about her marriage. Now twice or thrice they tried calling the people, but then the very minute they would see I don't want to name him, but you can say B who's Down syndrome, it would they would say no directly. So after I was in JMC, and she suddenly called me, and she said, can you come, Anita? So I said, yeah, I can. What happened? She said, no, there's something urgent and I need your help. So I went, and she said, can you take him out for a movie or something? And then, so that when the people come, then we will kind of, what Sandeep is also saying, I just remembered because of that. So, I took him, this was the old Chanakya people, if they remember, there were 2 steps. When you get down, and then your number used to come in the, at the top in red, right? So both of us, I gave the money, whatever. And when I told him कि तुझा उधर से ले आ plate, a tray, he said कि नहीं, मैं नहीं जाऊंगा वहां से. So both of us looked completely vulnerable, in the sense that who will go and get it. And I was I've never in my life have been so constricted in that sense. But then I finally kind of called out to the guy at the reception, and I said, please send the order out there. But when then of course everything went on fine. We saw the movie and all. But when I reached their place, I remember my friend breaking out, she said that how could I do this also, so she felt so guilty. And I said that it's okay, you have to think about both the children, and somewhere maybe this is so. She said, no, I'm not going to accept this. And then finally, I think there was a very nice family, and the guy, of course, loves this boy, and it's a really lovely kind of marriage that happened after that. But you can understand that how life can be so difficult at times, when it's when some things are easier said than done. In that sense.
If I can also just read out the comments over here. And I think Professor Ghai has already addressed Kaustav's question, but Dr. Broti Biswas has written that it was a very illuminating talk. And Kaustav has written, I want to hear from you, ma'am, what are the disjunctions in disability resistance you find between the actual lived world and the academic world? Your parking space episode suggests a lot of awareness is either lacking or people are simply insensitive. So you've already answered that, but I just thought that I should read that out.
They're simply insensitive. I mean, I don't know whether it's just that as if they can just simply use it. I mean, that is the thing. I mean, I suppose they could have kept the car there, only one car is, but that means that we are not important enough, for that parking space, which has been specially done as part of the legislation that is there, I mean, it's not like whatever. The first question, I've answered actually because I took that example. But, when you say the academic world is also very, I mean, I have to say that is almost, I use the term ignorance of, epistemology in disability. Because, it's almost like the pattern where, you kind of tell them something. I mean, Sandeep would bear this out with me. I mean, where they would kind of, you're talking to them about something about disability. I mean, rationally, no, I mean, not like whatever, no resistance, nothing, just trying to say something. They said, yeah, true, yeah, true, yeah, true. And after that, nothing, So to put disability in academia itself, that in itself is such a difficult job. I mean, for example, I mean, it's fine that like many a times I tell Sandeep that though I have, now courses and all, and people do come in, and we've got now the PhD course, of course, it will not go anywhere. But I'm not sure what the future will be, I mean, I'm really sometimes get scared, that because, like to have a particular program, which is a fixed program, but most of the things that we have are elective courses, and PhD of course is definitely program, but otherwise, elective courses and all, which we have been trying to, I mean, I'm talking about the academics, but this is not the academics of only one university. This is a part and parcel of every university, because, a bit few, when the new policy came, they actually said that we should have a separate university in which you only talk about disability, Now, the very minute they say that, they are actually bringing an exclusion. Clearly, they are trying to say that your academia is different and the academia which is there now is a different one. But you can see that, I mean, okay, maybe literature has it, or sociology has it, or whatever. But in Estes, I mean, gender studies, I mean, as such, see, there are people who are, who love you for whatever reasons, I mean, and or who like your work or whatever that is there. But, as such, most of the women's studies programs also all over the country, whether disability is being taught there, as an as a discipline, as an area of inquiry, and that I think is problematic. So while the actual lived world is the one in which, you are Devyang, you're inspirational, you're a, kind of a you know, in the sense concessional category, I think, you know. So you keep fighting for the playing field, you keep trying to say that, look, we have to do all this, and we keep fighting also. It's not as if we haven't fought, you know. But I think in the academia, it's even more difficult to kind of, you know, get the step in, you know. And I'm not sure whether I mean, you know, of course, we talk about, you know, the fact that we can at least say that these things are important. And there are, I mean, in JNU also and all, there are some PhDs, you know, and MPhils and all, which are being done on disability. But per se, as programs in DU, in JNU, in Jamia, I'm not sure. And in the education part, there are once again the optional courses, you know, which would be there. For example, BLEd, you know, or BEd. I mean, you know, they would say that they can be, but they've never thought about how, you know, it could have been taught as part of the mainstream. And I hate the word mainstream, but anyways, it's like, you know, I can't avoid it. But the point that it is there is definitely there. There's a very longish message. Some of the academic talk on subaltern groups is simply pretense. I agree wholeheartedly. I feel that mostly caters to a job market like any other job. But if used rightly, it can really do a lot of work in the disability practical work, actually with seminars like this one. Also, I feel transdisciplinary studies are crucial, where we bring scholars from disciplines as different as medicine and literature. Yes, definitely. I mean, the attempt is always that, you know, but I'm not sure as to how much of it has happened. I mean, like, I can't say that it has. I mean, it's sad also, I think. I'm not sure whether, I mean, I'm very happy. Yesterday I was like, it was a dream come true for me yesterday. But I mean, you know, such dreams, sometimes, you know, you don't know for how long they will stay on.
Anita, I want to ask this question.
Yeah.
Can you say more on your connect with psychology? Maybe have you fallen off of it, or how much are you close with psychology, your mother discipline?
You know, if you actually read Rethinking Disability in India,
Yeah.
I remember Dan putting in a you know, in my preface, which he wrote, sorry, the foreword, which he wrote. And he said that, I mean, it's completely psychological, you know, I mean, like, you know, because the parts that are mine, I mean, will always stay with me. I mean, you know, yes. Yeah, you can say that I have not, you know, written specifically in, no, I did with Professor Girishwar Mishra. I did a review of disability, you know, of 10 years, this thing. And I did, and he kind of, it was within the psychology, this thing. So it's not as if I've given up on psychology, but I do not agree with some parts of the psychology which were, but now if you take up critical psychology and critical disability, then there is a lot of, you know, similarities between the two. And I think I love to do that. I mean, like, no,
thank you. Thank you.
There are no more questions, Hem.
Looks like that.
What bulliya.
I think we can move ahead with the program.
Okay. So
thank you, Hem. Thank you. I can't get your name.
Thank you, Anita. It was very nice.
Yeah. No, I can't get the interpreter's name.
Karishma and Garima.
And Garima.
Yeah,
Thank you,
Karishma and
Garima.
Garima.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you.
Over to you, Anurima.
So I think then we can move to the rest of the event today, the concluding remarks. Hi,
Karuna.
Hi, Anita. Thank you for that very engaging session. I mean, one is always tempted to ask you questions, and then one is always wary about overeating time.
No, you can ask more, but later. Yeah, bully.
So,
yeah, so Karuna, over to you. Yeah.
So, good evening, everyone. It's sort of an uneasy honor to offer the concluding remarks to what has been a 5-day-long immersive experience in this international conference on disability, resistance, disruption, and transgression. Perhaps I'll use the conference's ages as a clue, and I'll depart from the convention of, looking at concluding remarks as a summary of the papers presented. And while I do this, I also should add that it would be a travesty to summarize a broad range of engagements in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
In some senses, it evokes the dialogue about dark academia in one of the last sessions I had the privilege of attending, precisely because this subculture, notwithstanding the criticism leveled against it, is also read as a disenchantment with institutional frameworks that demote knowledge as profit in terms of quantifiable terms. I concede I'm still old-fashioned to believe that true academic engagement is an opening of the mind, a broadening of the perspective. I want to begin my concluding remarks with a vignette. A few years ago, in what was considered at that time as the first literary disability studies conference that was organized in this country, incidentally by the Department of English of Delhi University, while I was in between sessions, I was approached by a colleague who asked me if I found the conference boring. Now, admittedly, these are the sort of comments and conversations that are part of the atmosphere of a conference, precisely what would have happened even in the course of our 5 days, where speakers, chairs, keynotes, plenaries become the topic of discussion. But the difference was that this colleague of mine indicated difficulty in navigating the presence of sign language interpreters, the pauses in a visually impaired presenter's paper while they either acquainted themselves with the braille text or the rendition of TTS software, or the attention that had to be paid to a presenter with a speech impairment. In my own continual affirmation of the ways in which disability studies has profoundly altered my mode of engagement vis-a-vis my own discipline, and also the kind of conceptual framework that it makes itself available to work with, in hindsight, I've begun to acknowledge that what was expressed by my colleague was resistance to inclusivity in the fundamental sense. And it forces us to consider and perhaps ask ourselves the question, how inclusive are our academic spaces really? Does inclusivity just imply affirmative action? Isn't that both disservice and injustice to assume that this is so? In some senses, I have to say that it's serendipitous that I'm, in that sense, making this sort of rhetorical gesture, precisely because that is where I think Anita concluded her talk, in talking about disability scholars and what she, of course, acknowledges as a problematic mainstream, both in terms of the titling of something as mainstream, but also in terms of that space in itself. When I first began teaching about a decade ago, many parts of my own institution remained inaccessible to students, faculty, and staff with orthopedic impairments. Notwithstanding the fact that students, faculty, and staff with disability are part of the university space, something that we all continually contend with is whether our academic spaces, as it were, engagements and conversations are accessible. I do not by this imply infrastructural accessibility like ramps, lifts, accessible washrooms, braille signages. But what I also mean by this are modes of academic engagement where we do not acknowledge what it means for someone with spinal issues to sit through 6 to 8 hours of conference sessions, or the difficulty in accessing conference brochures and posters, which while they're very visually appealing, can remain inaccessible, or PowerPoint presentations that are not read, or audio visuals without subtitles, or even someone like me, who is actually a fast speaker and therefore can be inaccessible. I acknowledge in that sense my own, if not intentional, then at least unintended complicity in terms of the fact that these are gestures that do not always necessitate self-introspection. One of the other things that I want to reflect on as far as this anecdote is concerned is the ease with which this conversation was initiated with me, assuming my identity as a non-disabled person. One has to both be wary and aware of how one can be tokenist in one's engagements with disability. As disability studies as an academic engagement emerges in institutional spaces, one also has to concede that even in conferences like the current one, there can be a disregard to precisely what this discipline opens up, the problematic aspects of inclusionism. In this regard, I quote Anita from her Rethinking Disability in India, where she says, the goal of academic discourse in disability is to address epistemological questions that reframe disability. Historically, the intelligentsia as well as the community has not questioned the naturalness of conveying inferior and defective personhood to individuals with such physical and cognitive impairments. In this imaginary, impairments become sources of conflict, tragic outcomes, and pity, rather than access points of different phenomenological life worlds. And I suppose I want to use Anita's quote and reiterate my invocation of Sarah Ahmed made yesterday from her Being Included, Racism and Diversity in Institutional Life, where she says that perhaps the promise of diversity is that it can both be attached to those bodies that look different and detached from those bodies as a sign of inclusion. For instance, if you just allow for affirmative action to be a particular kind of paradigm, the very fact that our institutional spaces have people with disability means that we can completely efface ourselves from what disability should unpack for us in terms of what the actual nuanced meaning of inclusivity should imply, right? The promise of diversity, as Sarah Ahmed goes on to say, could then be described as a problem. The sign of inclusion makes the signs of exclusion disappear. When we, therefore, attempt integration and inclusivity in such a paradigm, we basically commit the violence of making bodies that are essentially different invisible, normative. And which is why I go back to the idea of how within academic spaces, the kind of privileging that we have of the ideational world makes us forget the sense of the body and what the body actually does, the way the body habits space, the way the body mobilizes itself. And in that sense, the fact that disability as a discursive tradition is constantly navigating this terrain, forcing us to acknowledge the very phenomenological reality of the body and asks us to look at the epistemic violence in our very thought process, especially within liberal humanities, right? A tradition that I have been trained in, is something that I think is worthwhile to hold on to. Right? When we therefore look at this, this is precisely what I believe is at stake when we assume that solely institutionalizing affirmative action and infrastructural accessibility makes us inclusive. We have to heed the call of disability activists when they state nothing for us without us. And in our academic engagements with disability studies and disability representation, we have to see for ourselves if our engagements are ableist, and if we are then not appropriating disability for the sake of making an argument. As sometimes I believe, unfortunately, does tend to happen, where the engagement with disability, as I've argued, can be tokenistic. I therefore want to conclude by saying that an engagement with disability studies should provide alternatives to the reifications of our academic preoccupations that perpetuate a discourse of capacity, capability, that in the truest sense are operating within the normative, which for me personally is the locus of disability discourse's ability to resist, disrupt, and transgress. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karuna, for that all-encompassing concluding remarks.
Yeah.
I could have said much more, but today it's not my job here to give the vote of thanks for the formal closure of the event for the 5-day international conference. May I call upon now the Secretary of IDSC, Mukul Chaturvedi, to formally close the event and also to deliver the vote of thanks. Mukul, over to you.
Am I audible, Arunima?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you so much, Arunima. And on behalf of the IDSC, it is my pleasure and my privilege to propose the vote of thanks for this wonderful conference that we've had over a period of 5 days. And this conference would not have been possible. This kind of stimulating discussion, rich presentations would not have been possible if we'd not had great coordination, great teamwork, and institutional support. So I would like to acknowledge my gratitude, my thanks to our partnering institutions. And let me begin by thanking the principal, Khalsa College, Professor Jaswinder Singh, and also Professor Vimal Rar, who is the director for Guru Angad Dev Teaching Learning Center. Another partnering institution, Kirodimal College and the Center for Disability Research and Training, and Professor Vibha Singh Chauhan for her support. These institutional heads made it possible, both infrastructural and academic support to our endeavor. Also, our keynote speakers. We've had a rich galaxy of speakers, both from India and abroad. Thank you so much, Anita Ghai. Let me begin by thanking you for your great address and how you have kind of linked it with more everyday practices of resistance and making it more rooted to our real and everyday existence. Then we've had some brilliant lectures, Stephen Cosisto, Tom Shakespeare, who delivered the keynote, Fiona Campbell, Professor Sandhya Limay. So these speakers gave a brilliant engagement and encouraged a lot of interventions and insights. This kind of endeavor is not possible if we do not have supportive colleagues. So our colleagues at Khalsa College, Madhvi Dushti, Zutshi, Shoikat Ghosh, Shweta Khilani, and Shinjoy Dotta. All these colleagues were there for all our support in both technical and academic support. Thanks are also due to our sign language interpreters who have worked round the clock with us, facilitating, helping us for their great support. Let me extend my warm thanks to Garima, Dhruv, Ajit, Shubham, Stuti, and Karishma. Thank you so much for your support. Then also, I would like to extend my warm thanks to all my colleagues at IDSC who have put in a lot of hard work and teamwork. Ritvik, Arunima, Shilpa Das, Hem, Nandini. It's been a lot of teamwork, team spirit, which has led to a conference which, and this is our second conference. The first one, as Someshwar, our chairperson, told us was, and was a great conference in Lucknow last year, our inaugural conference. And so with this, our conference has come to a close. And our speakers, we've had brilliant speakers, rich, stimulating discussions in these 5 days. So we will go back with more things to think about, how to make disability studies more inclusive, mainstreaming it. Delhi University has done it. I'm sure Karuna and Sandeep will let Professor Anita Ghai that how we have managed to integrate some of it in our BA honors curriculum, and we are teaching it. So that has been one step forward in that direction. And so thank you all so much. I hope that we will come back with a bigger conference, a more interesting one next year. And also for the participants, there is a link to a feedback form which Ritwik is going to share, so we all have to fill it in. And for the participants, all the e-certificates will be emailed to you. So that is something which would be done shortly after the conference, maybe in a couple of days. So do bear with us for that. And thank you once again, all of you, for a very warm, engaging, and a delightful conference, which we all enjoyed and learned a great deal. Thank you all once again. Thank you so much. And thank you, Somesh, for taking this wonderful initiative and involving all of us and getting us into disability studies. Thank you. And with that, our conference comes to a close. Thank you all and goodbye.